Great. Hi. Good morning, everybody. My name is Hannah Yardley, and I'm the Chief People and Culture Officer at Achievers. We are a reward and recognition company, but if you'd like to learn a little bit more, we've got a booth out in the back as well. I'm really looking forward to talking about some really important and timely topics.
Hi, everyone. I'm Julie Kline. I'm the Chief Human Resources Officer at North Memorial Health. We have 2 hospitals, 15 clinics, and about 6,500 employees. And as you can imagine, this is an important topic for us because of what's happened the last few years.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jenny Mayorskaya, and I'm the CEO and the founder of a company called Store Club. We provide and build fertility, maternity, parental programs, basically end-to-end reproductive care to support employees, build really inclusive culture, and at the end of the day, achieve the very often most important goal in life for many people.
Good morning, I'm Lorenz. I'm the VP of Human Resources for 3M's Transportation and Electronics Business Group. Super excited to start my day with all of you and talk about this important topic.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Toni Newborn, pronouns she, her, hers. I'm the lone government employee here on this panel. I serve as the Director of Human Resources for the City of St. Paul and also have formerly served as the Chief Equity Officer for the city as well. Happy to be here and be the lone government employee.
All right, thank you all. So, first question, we're going to start with Julie. How are you demonstrating to your employees that their work is not only critical to your company's, or that their work is not only valued, but critical to your company's trajectory?
I really appreciate that question for a number of reasons, but like everything else in HR, there's no one simple answer where you can say, oh, just offer better benefits or something like that. For us, it was getting down to the basics. You can imagine with what's happened in healthcare with COVID, we needed to look at what would motivate our employees. And for our employees, it was providing a solid foundation where there wasn't so much chaos anymore. And so I know that doesn't sound sexy and exciting, but it's the reality for us is we really had to look at how can we provide them with stability in their roles, in their function, and in turn, what we could do is we would build up that employee engagement, and rather than outwardly saying, hey, we need you here as part of our future, which was the reality, we looked at, okay, by providing this stability for them, we will in turn give them an opportunity to really be part of that future for us. So, you know, the way my team and I refer to it is we put the H back in HR and really looked at the whole motivational strategy for people. And so that's what's working for us in healthcare right now. I don't think anyone's necessarily found that silver bullet, but it is something that's worked for us. And in turn, we are starting to see results. Our turnover has gone down 3%. Probably doesn't sound like a lot, but it is when you've got, you know, highly educated staff like we do. We've also went from 600 open recs down to 400, which I can promise you I did the happy dance, and some of my team members are here right now. It was not pretty, but it really meant a difference for our team members to actually see some of those results. So we'll continue to do it and modify as we need to, but getting back to the basics really, really tied them into, and we're seeing the results now.
Laura, would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, so I'll add, putting the H in HR is something I think that resonates strongly with me, especially being part of a giant company. So, my first answer to this question is sort of, well, we align our primary metrics and we align our total reward system so that everyone is paid on our ability to achieve operating income. And I can see from the looks on your faces how much that might inspire you and resonate with you. And that's probably how it hits our employees as well. So it's important, I think, to have total rewards that line up to the organizational goals. None of us would argue with that. But I think what's even more important in times like these last 3 years where we're all kind of reflecting on what matters and how we spend our time at work, something we try to focus on a bit more these days is our purpose and our promise. And our promise is to improve people's lives by solving the world's tough problems. So the more we can connect with people so they can keep their eyes fixed on that better horizon, I think helps them get through the day-to-day, sometimes, not always, but the grind of what's required to keep businesses moving forward.
Yeah. Well, that segues well into the next topic. Hannah, I'll start with you. How do you go about fostering a sense of shared purpose among your employees in this new hybrid mixed work format world?
Yeah, purpose is a big one. Purpose, I think, has changed quite significantly for so many people over the last couple of years. And for the longest time, it was ingrained in what the purpose of your organization was doing. When you showed up for work, it was built on the purpose of what your organization was doing. But I'm really happy to see that that's changed. Don't get me wrong, I'm invested in the purpose of my business. I love the fact that we're changing millions of lives and the way people feel rewarded and recognized for that. But I'm also Hannah, a mother. I'm also Hannah, a runner. I'm also Hannah, who is really passionate about CSR. And that's purposeful to me, not just my job, but who I am as an individual. And when we are seeing the way that that's taking place and starting to take hold in organizations, that to me is where purpose is really being driven from. So the way that organizations can show up and not just drive organizational purpose, but personal purpose is where that magic is starting to happen, because you're starting to feel like you can show up as your authentic self. You're starting to find communities through things like ERGs or whatever that community means to you. And I think that's where that purpose is starting to have a great impact and a greater impact on really changing how organizations are thinking about you as an individual and thinking about you as a person.
Laura, do you want to talk about how 3M is doing this as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So our purpose at 3M is pretty aspirational. It's about unlocking people, ideas, and science to reimagine what's possible. So it's kind of a big, bold idea. And some people, like our folks in the lab, our corporate scientists, see themselves in this really easily. And for others, we all need to be inspired a little bit differently to kind of latch onto the purpose. So there's, I think, two things that we try to do that are a huge focus for us as of late. We try to reinforce that purpose, and we try to show how 3M is showing up and doing that, improving people's lives. As we think back to the pandemic as one of the world's largest N95 producers, that was a time where it was a great source of pride. People were working very long hours. We were building plants. We were having volunteer employees go from city to city to go to these plants and just produce as much as possible. And it wasn't about turning a profit because, we kept our prices the same. It was about contributing to the world and doing something meaningful. And that really resonated with 3Mers across the world. And it's something that tied us together and gave us a sense of pride, and it gave us a sense of contribution, that we could play a small part in protecting the people at the front line, doing the hard work in a time of such great uncertainty across the world. So we talk about that purpose, and that's a really important what we're striving to do. And then we try to give more flexibility to the how. So if we're reimagining what's possible, we probably don't want to tell our marketers that they have to be in a certain cube space in St. Paul, Minnesota at 7:30 a.m. We probably want to give people a little bit more flexibility to understand how do they best work, how do they balance those times as professional and as mom and as runner and as human and as volunteer. And so over the last few years, we've introduced our program called Work Your Way, where employees decide through the boundaries of their role, but do they want to work from home? Do they want to now work remote from a different state? Do they want to work hybrid? And how do they see themselves contributing best and able to contribute to that purpose?
Toni, what does that autonomy look like at the city of St. Paul, and how does that go towards, empowering your employees and contributing to the larger shared purpose?
Yeah, working in government post-COVID, it's just been really hard. And if you think about it, government workers, this idea of working remotely and having any type of flexibility, never, 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 never would anyone have thought about that, and have been in conversations where people were like, no, you can't work from home. And then all of a sudden, we are working from home, at least some of our employees were, because we have public works, we have parks, we have police, we have fire. In each one of our departments, we have 15 operating departments. Each one of our departments could be its own business and have its own HR director and own HR staff. So then we're bringing 3,000 employees together and saying, you can do this, you can't do this, you can do that, but you can't do that. And trying to respond to this pandemic in a way, and keep people motivated and engaged, and not, running for the hills because this is really hard work. We also, our budget is based off of taxpayer dollars. So, this idea of, just do it whatever you want. Let's get a stipend for you to work from home and set up your office and all these things. We don't have none of that. And so we have a little bit of it, but we still have to establish a public purpose. So for us at the City of St. Paul, it's been more about changing, in HR, we had to flip over every policy, practice, and procedure that we had to ensure that our employees and our residents would be supported and continue to receive the resources that we needed. And so we had to start thinking way out of the box for us. Whereas when we look at our private sector, they're like, oh yeah, it's fine. We'll just ship you your stuff home. And we were thinking like, oh, you got to carry your computer home with the wires hanging out. And so it was just a completely different mentality and perspective on it. And we were forced to think outside of the box and be innovative and creative. And we're still in the space. It's 2023. We're 3 years out. We're still recovering from a budget standpoint. But now we're having conversations, not now, but we've been having conversations around what amenities, I'll say that, can we offer to our employees to keep them engaged? So we're looking at some of those internet stipends, which, our IT director is having a fit about that. But our partners in Ramsey County and Minneapolis are doing that work. We're looking at parking, paying for parking for those who have to be at work. We're looking at subsidized daycare. And I know some of these things for you all is like, yeah, we already have it. Government, no, no. And so those are ways that we have tried to retain our employees, offer that flexibility so that they can be at home. I had a COVID baby and took over the HR job during COVID, which is awful. And awful. And so I needed the flexibility. I was one of those folks who had the babies on the call and needed time off. And so I was able to, in a way that I think previous directors or other staff, I was able to relate to staff more closely because of the situation that I was in. So we're gonna do this. We're going to think from an equity and inclusion, belonging standpoint, and ensure that we keep our employees. We understand it's a pandemic. We need to be flexible in our rigid rules that we have in government, and work to, I like bringing the H back into HR. What we say is humanize HR. And it's funny that you have to even say that, because we have gotten so far away from being human beings in human resources. And so that's been the focus and one of many strategies. We haven't gotten there because my budget hasn't increased significantly, but it is about a strategy and being intentional around the blends.
Well, Toni got us rolling on the next question, which is an important piece, benefits. Ginny, I want to start with you. How important is it for companies to offer robust and equitable benefit packages nowadays that make people feel taken care of? Because work-life balance is top of mind for, I think, a lot of people nowadays.
Totally, Ryan. Well, I'm smiling because the story is just exactly to the point, right? And I just want all of us just recognize for a second, look around us. This is incredible how we just finally made a significant change in representation and real diversity and inclusion, right? And when we live in this new reality, we all together build, thanks to you as well, very often I think when people talk about work-life balance, what does it specifically mean? And If we're talking about life and work, does it mean that work is death? And probably not, right? And very often the answer I find very similar to what you shared, and I think you as well, Laura, is it's actually we're talking about work and family balance, right? And for many of us who maybe don't have kids yet, that's just like a different type of family, right? This is what we're really talking about. And as we all really humans, family is a whole world for us, right? But we have to spend so much time at work that this is becoming our family. What we find with many customers who are using family built-in benefits and many other employers who are not yet is it's becoming a big issue that regardless of genders, people do quit their job if they don't find support, right? If they have to make family building decisions and they have to pay for them as well. If we're talking about IVF, surrogacy, child adoption, but even people, even if they just conceive naturally, we find statistically about 35% of employees actually quit right after birth, right, or around this moment, because it's just like too much going on. And even worse, another 20% of people who do stay would quit in year one after they had a baby, right? And if we're talking about twins or triplets, we all know that answer, right? This is probably a guaranteed attrition, unfortunately, at this point. And then remember about 5 years ago, we all were fighting for getting more millennials into workforce, right? Providing all this support and benefit systems for that. Well, great news, we got significant progress. Now this millennial talent became managers, right? And now you have to continuously engage and provide more benefits for them as well. And younger generation who are not building families yet, they know that it's going to take them longer to get to this point, right? And many of them already worried because they know how hard it's going to be to conceive later in life, and they will have to optimize for IVF, right? So more and more people actually thinking about choosing the employer. Hey, they ask this question directly. Do you provide family forming benefits, fertility benefits, right? What we also observed is about 67% of people, regardless of their stage of family built-in or like now plan or later, actually say, I would switch jobs, I would switch employer in order to get an employer with this type of benefits, right? We're talking about very serious numbers. And then finally, when we talk about family building or reproductive benefits, it's not just about, again, either preserving fertility or actively building a family, but it's also about overall well-being. And again, not just about women or LGBTQ community for whom those benefits are really fundamental, but also about men. For example, reproductive hormones, right? How many people are affected, especially in the C-suite of companies, with menopause symptoms? Personally, my family has been very affected, starting from my grandmother to my mother. I saw how hard it is, right, to stay very productive. So when you think about, hey, how do we retain and motivate people, right? When we call our people, hey, we're family, let's treat them as family. Let's help them build families. And this is what we find really fundamental, right? To have this really honesty with each other. And if we call people family, let's help them achieve the most important goal of their life. Let's make sure that they can build families while we're building business together. And we see it really works. More and more employees, when employer sponsors services like IVF, then about 90% of people actually prefer to stay in their job even after tough, even sometimes high-risk births, because they feel very loyal. Hey, this company stood up for me and they made my dream come true. You cannot compare this with anything else.
Yeah. Julie, do you want to add anything just about how the benefits of North Memorial have evolved specifically in the past few years?
Yeah, so we are relooking at our entire total compensation package, including the benefits. And as you were speaking, I was like, I hope somebody on my team over here, oh, she's writing it down, thank you. It's really interesting because what I'm hearing from you is you are making that connection and you are building the relationships versus 10 years ago, we didn't necessarily want to be part of the family. You know, we all had that crazy uncle, and I don't want to be hanging out with my crazy uncle after work, right? Whereas now, if you can make those deep connections with people and you can have meaning and purpose in their life, and you can align with that, that's where you're going to have the secret sauce to retain people forever. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah. So Hannah, I'm going to start with you on the next question. How do you make sure that your company's executives are in tune with the day-to-day work that their employees do so that there isn't some disconnect, because you're not going to have that, you know, the employees feeling valued if the top of the org chart doesn't know what they're doing.
Right, yeah. It's funny, I was talking with someone at the table earlier this morning who's not in HR and called HR leaders and practitioners the movers and the shakers in the business, because they seem to have an ability to be able to get stuff done around the business. But interestingly, actually, I think it was over 40% of HR leaders don't believe that their leadership teams are ready to make change, are ready to react to the changing nature of what's happening looking forward. So that's probably your person on your left and the person on your right if it's not you. That's a heck of a lot of people in this room that actually aren't able to influence up and into the organization because the leaders aren't listening to what's actually needing to change. And so that means what do we do when it comes to actually being able to connect with employees at whatever level in the organization? And first and foremost, I think it's all about listening. We heard a lot about this idea of hyper-personalization, that things are meaningful to me, maybe different to the meaning, that are different to the meaning for other people. It's that idea of listening is so important. And you can listen at the corporate level. Pulse surveys, great. Get them out there, listen to the employee voice. But if you're not taking action against those things, then you're not changing the things that people are telling you about. And it's really hard to take action at the corporate level. It's really hard to feel like some benefit change is going to necessarily impact me. But when we talk about it becoming down to the personal level, that we hear at the department or the team level that something like a fertility benefit is really important to me, that's where you can make that meaningful change. Absolutely. But, another but in there, it's one thing to say that you're going to make a change, but if you get employees actively involved in that, so they are the ones that are helping to identify what the changes are, they're not just taking on the change as from what corporation is saying needs to happen, then you're going to have even more meaningful impact. I'm going to throw one more but in there. But if you don't actually measure and hold your leaders accountable to that, then they're not going to take those actions. And so you need to be measuring your leaders on the change that they say that they're going to make that's related to the employee voice, and it's that full cycle that comes back again. And that's how you take what is information at every employee level and make it meaningful and take it back up to the level and have that wonderful symbolic and that cyclical process go through again. Not symbolic, that was the wrong word. Exactly the opposite of symbolic. Cyclical process that goes round and round to be able to make that connection between the two.
Toni, can you talk about what that looks like between the different layers of the city of St. Paul?
Yeah, absolutely. So many things. We just finished an employee pulse survey. I have a staff member on my team who's been with the city for 45 years, and she verified that this is the first time that the city has ever done any type of employee engagement survey or employee pulse survey. Now, what happened before the 45 years, I don't know. But I can say for 45 years, we have not done that. And that's amazing to think about, that we haven't engaged our employees in a way and asking them, how are things going? The mayor's office, the administration, so those are our CEOs and the elected officials. They were a little nervous about it because, like, we're going to ask people what they think, and then they're going to tell us, and they're going to be mad, and then we're going to have to do something. Like, yes. Yes, all of that. And so we're in a space right now where we've got our data back, people got over their feelings, right? And we're rolling it out to our team, and now living with what are we going to do next? And from an equity and inclusion and belonging standpoint, I love your point, Hannah, about the employees need to take ownership of this. I can't come down with my suit on and say, this is our plan for employee engagement. This is how we're going to improve. The employees need to take ownership of that, and we want to create a space for that. And so what we're doing in each of our individual departments is saying, here's the data, here's what you said, here's the citywide data, here's your department data. Now let's form a survey action team to then come up for the employees themselves to come up with the plan and bring it back to leadership, and we support it in whatever way. We haven't done the citywide rollout as of yet, but we're in the process of doing that. And we'll see what happens there too. There's gonna be lots of feelings in that space, but it's really important to engage. And the fact that we haven't done it in 45 years for many different reasons is an issue, but now that we have, I'm excited about how we move forward in this and ensuring that folks, our employees, take ownership of this work, and that, you know, our tagline for the city is building a city that works for all of us. And that's an equity statement. And what the mayor, the continuation of that statement is, all of us have to get to work. So it's not just Toni, it's not just the leaders. The other thing that I'll add is, you know, I'm not an HR professional. I'm an attorney by trade. I was in equity and inclusion. I used to investigate civil rights complaints and landed that was a long story, landed into this role, kicking and screaming into this role as the HR director. But now I didn't have a true appreciation for HR until I got into the role, because I was like, it's too many no's, it's too much compliance, people hate us, I don't like it. I like being in a happy space, and so I don't like people cringing every time they hear my name. And I realized that HR is the nucleus of the organization, whether you like it or not. It is the nucleus of the organization. Everything that an employee experience comes through HR. And so what I've been doing is making sure that the electeds and also the leadership realize that. And the mayor and I recently had a conversation. I'm not going to disparage him in this space because it'll get back to him. But he said, oh, Toni, I get it. I get the role that HR plays. So now I want you to do bigger and better. I'm like, well, you need to give me more money to do what you're talking about. But I'm glad that you realize how important this department is and how we need to elevate it. It's no longer women in the backdoor office running around putting tape together and keeping the organization together, right? Still largely women in our department, but this is a central core department, and we need to be treated that way. So stop cutting us, so that I can do these employee pulse surveys, because they cost $80,000 for us, so I can continue to implement the plans that our employees said, this is what we want, these are the changes that we want to make. And so being an actual strategic partner, I think in government, that has not been the role of HR, and we're working with my leadership team to make sure that it is.
I was just going to say, I want to add to your comment. I mean, everybody takes those pulse surveys and nobody does anything with them, right? And so what you're describing is you're building trust within an organization, which I think trust is lacking out in the workforce right now. So how can we bring that back? And it is by executing upon it. Yeah, that's great.
I'm not sure whether people would rather get an email from legal or HR. That could be a debate that we could have at another point in time. But
or finance. Finance is in that mix.
But the point I was going to make is I think one of the biggest senses of relief that I ever had early in my career, when handing out pulse surveys and getting them going, was giving us the ability to be able to not ask some questions. And I'm not saying that you don't have to stick your head in the sand like an ostrich, but if you're not planning on making changes in an area, stop asking the questions that you're not going to do stuff about, because you just keep asking and people keep giving you feedback and you're not doing anything with it. So focus in on those areas that you're ready to make change on and give yourself some relief in being able to take action and see that meaningful change move forward. And that was the best thing that I ever advice that I ever took and have moved forward with.
Toni, I want to start with you on the next question. Through times of economic uncertainty, businesses go through their share of ups and downs. Cities, especially, which are dependent on the funding you get, through times of uncertainty, how do you keep city employees focused and connected and make sure that they feel secure?
That's a great question, because the pandemic brought all of that out, right? And then you add in the murder of George Floyd and the civil unrest that took place in both Minneapolis and St. Paul. So our emergency operations center was like high on alert for a good year. But for sure, the first 6 or 7 months. And there was a lot of uncertainty about jobs. The mayor and deputy mayor and the city council committed to not laying anyone off during that time. And that was, you asked Hennepin County, Ramsey County, Minneapolis, all of the bigger cities, that was not the case for government. But we stayed true to that, but that's at a cost, right? That limited our budget significantly, and we're still recovering from that. And I share all of that to say there was just a lot of uncertainty, a lot of what do we do next? Where are we going to work? We had librarians who couldn't work in the library, and they made masks, not the N95, which we appreciate, but they were making cloth masks when cloth masks were okay at the beginning. And we had park staff who was redeployed to handing out food. We had a call center. We never did that before. So there was just a lot of uncertainty during this time. And communication, I know that's like an age-old statement of communication is the key. I'll tell you, we didn't do well with that. The employees came back and were like, what's going on? We haven't heard from the mayor. We haven't heard from the administration about what's happening. And we had to, learn as we go. Like, oh yeah, I guess you do need to know that because we're in this place of emergency trying to, save the world here in St. Paul. But we forgot to be intentional around communicating with folks, putting them at ease and saying, it's okay. We're going to be okay. We have a plan and we're working through that plan. And what we've learned out of our employee pulse survey is our staff doesn't think that we communicate well. There's not enough open and honest and transparent communication between the administration and our employees. That's a problem. We're still struggling with that. And so I guess I'm not offering any advice about or recommendations about the successes we had. I'm offering the opportunities, the huge opportunities that we have as a city to ensure that we do bring some peace and some stability to our employees. And I will say, on a more positive note, once we started communicating more regularly, newsletters, updates, et cetera, we stopped getting those emails and those panicked emails about what we were doing. And so the communication was really key. Having a plan and trying to be as inclusive as possible in the plan. We redeployed, like I mentioned before, our whole world turned upside down. Every city service that you can think about, public works, parks, libraries, all of those places, we had to reimagine the work that we did. And people were doing crazy things, not illegal, but just like things that were outside of their job description. And we had to put our employees at ease in saying, we do have a plan. We're trying to keep you employed because the alternative is you go on layoff and unemployment and all of that. We're trying to keep you employed and we're invested in that. And we're gonna continue to be those public servants and offer the resources that our community, who's also in crisis, need. And so I think just to summarize, the communication is key. We didn't do well at first. We needed to get there, and we eventually got there, sort of. And having a plan and making sure people know that you have a plan and being as inclusive as possible with our employees and reimagining the work that they can do when you're dealing with a crisis.
Laura or Jenny, do you want to go first?
I would like to add to this also. One of the things we discovered is very relevant, Toni, what you're sharing is to be vulnerable with your people, right? This is a workplace. It's supposed to be hard, especially if you are doing something innovative, if you are building urban infrastructure, right? You're building innovative plans like all of this. And I find very often maybe middle managers are trying to look as heroes, right? This is like our job. We have to lead, and that's why we have to be the strongest, the smartest, and all of this in the room. And that prevents just communication loop really working. So one of the aspects we find very successful in communication is just be you in the room and encourage other managers as well, right? Getting vulnerable with their people. And this is where, like, hey, don't play this game. Hey, here's the problem. You manage to deal with this, right? Because this definitely completely breaks up engagement. But how do you say, hey, those are the issues. Let's figure out all together because yes, it's a lot. Yes, we failed doing this, right? Acknowledge that and just building this trust from ground up.
And Laura, do you want to talk about what this is looking like at 3M right now?
Yeah. hard. So, there's probably no more important time to think about how to motivate and retain people than when you're going through a tough business cycle or a time of transformation. Some of us have been lucky enough to work in environments where, excuse me, where there's that wave carrying you forward. You've got growth, you've got investment, you're hiring, and that's so easy. If we're being honest, that's easy. You're like, oh, cool. How do I design the incentive trip? How do I do this kind of employee engagement or activity? Because we have money to do it, right? Sometimes we have money. And then sometimes we don't. And so I think it's a really important topic. First point, it's obvious, but it's important just to let it set in. It's hard and it's important. And as I think about for us in 3M, you may have seen in the news, we're going through some very deep and serious restructuring. I've worked at the same company for 22 years, and I have a vision of what 3M is, who we are, what our values are, and we're doing some things that are different than what I've experienced in my past. And so when I think about motivating people, part of it is keeping our eyes fixed on the horizon. What are we trying to do? What's different? What's bright? What's exciting about the future? Because in this moment, we all know it's hard. And it's also about being respectful, taking a moment to acknowledge and to look back at our past, with some honor where appropriate, to honor contributions of those who came before us, to honor the people that have been now impacted by restructuring, who are, by the way, exceptional employees. So if any of you are lucky enough to interview them, give me a call. I can let you know. To honor those people, to understand what is true about who we still are as a company, what's important in our heritage that we want to continue, that we value, that we have pride in, and then being really honest about the future is going to be different, helping people understand on an individual level how they're part of it, and really keeping that focus. So again, I work for a big company, and we can start getting kind of corporate speaky in big companies. And hopefully you don't in the government sector, because that's unpleasant for everyone. But I think all these things I've said are true, and what's most important in times like this is to get down to an individual basis and to understand how is a person being impacted by the change, and how is this one person and their unique skills important to our future, and make sure that our leaders are equipped to have that conversation. When we're going through a giant change, it's going to be very difficult to be inspired by some of the leaders that you've been on this whole journey with over time. But on a day-to-day, the person you work with most closely, when they are attuned to you as an individual, when they understand the unique skills you have and the contributions you make every day, I think that's our best hope of retention, is getting it down to a very specific, individualized level.
Okay, well, to close us out, can you each share your number one piece of advice for other company leaders when it comes to retaining and motivating employees? We'll start with you, Hannah, and go down the line.
Sure. As I keep reading the screen, I'm reflecting on the title of the session, which is Retaining and Motivating Employees by Showing Them That Their Work Matters. I feel like 10 years ago, that would have said, by telling them that their work matters, we would have told you why there's purpose in the organization. Showing's not so bad. But if I was to change that one word, retaining and motivating employees by listening to them about why their work matters, because it is so specific to you as an individual as to why your work matters to you. And when you can show up and feel known in an organization, when you can feel supported, when you can feel included, that's when that work is really going to matter to them.
I would say to be creative. There's so many cliches out there. And again, everybody is throwing stuff at the wind to see what will stick. And I think you have to be creative. I would also say, just in being with this group right here, we're all coming from different organizations, and being able to listen to each other and taking some of the best of this organization and that and what have you, and figuring out how to apply it into your organization.
I would say not being afraid of making changes, small and big ones. And I know specifically in the benefits industry, it might seem like, oh my God, this requires a budget. We don't really have money, right, to invest. Dive a little bit deeper. Many initiatives which are really meaningful actually drive savings, especially in healthcare. I can specifically talk about family building. Many of the programs actually going to save you millions of dollars if you do it right. And even like smaller changes, when you listen to people and they propose those initiatives, can be done at a pretty low cost. It's more like how do you engage people to actually contribute to this change, but don't be afraid of that.
Yeah, I like these ideas. If I had one idea, it would just be, to engage with your employees authentically, meaningfully, and as people first. I think sometimes we all get rewarded for cool-looking PowerPoints and nifty videos with great music and spoken word poetry. But at the end of the day, all of us are people, and we value when our individual leaders show up for us, listen to us, and show us they care. So my one piece of advice is we don't have to overcomplicate it or make it programmatic. When we engage meaningfully with people as people, that makes the biggest difference.
I agree with everything that everybody said. And how I would summarize my thoughts and recommendations would be to embed equity, racial equity, inclusion, and belonging into the work of HR and into the work that you're doing. And if you do that, then you'll accomplish all of the things that everyone has said here on the stage. You will listen, you'll practice vulnerability, you'll practice empathy in the work that you're doing, you'll engage employees, you will motivate them, you will invite them to the table, have them create the table and take ownership of the work that you're doing. And so if you have an equity and inclusion person on your team, make sure that you're working with them in linestep and you're aligned with the work of HR and equity is one and the same. And that's the clarity that I gained from being in this role, is that the equity work won't happen unless HR is at the front of it and the ambassadors of it. So again, you'll accomplish all of these things that everyone here has talked about on the stage if you embed equity, racial equity, into the work of HR and into the work that you're doing.
Yeah. All right, well, that wraps us up. Thank you all for a terrific discussion, and please give these 5 a round of applause.